G'day, I'm Mrs. Dow and welcome to Mrs. Dow's Art Room. Here's today's lesson. Today we're making clay coil pots. Step 1 is the base. We need to take a small piece of clay out of our ball and turn that into a nice even ball. You can do this by rolling or patting it between your hands. Then you squish it between the palms of your hands to flatten it out, making sure that it's as even as possible the whole way through. If you pop it down on the table, you can use the palm of your hand here to tap in a circular motion to flatten it out and get it into a nice round circle. If your clay splits at all, you can rub the edges with your finger, applying a tiny dab of water where necessary to make sure we don't have any cracks before we start joining. Step 2, we prepare the clay for joining coils. For this, you'll need a toothbrush or a plastic knife will do. And don't forget to have a small bowl of water handy. So we scratch the surface around the edge of our base. We need to scratch the two surfaces in order for our clay to join together. But we'll also need some glue. In the clay world, this is known as slip, and it's pretty much slimy clay. After you've scratched up and textured the surface, we can set our base aside and start to create our coils. Okay, so step 3 is rolling coils. You'll take a small piece of clay. We're going to make sure it's smooth between our hands first, and then you can lay it on a piece of card or on your table, and we're going to roll with our fingertips starting from the center, gently making our hands roll back and forth out to the edges. Once our coil is the right thickness, then we can prepare it to join to our base, which leads us to step 4, joining the coils. We'll use our plastic knife or toothbrush to scratch up the surface of the coil, just like we did the base. You can use a little dab of water to do this, and this will take some of the clay. Or you can grab a small piece of clay, dip it in the water, and mush it between your fingers, creating glue or slip. If you add this to the surfaces, when we go to join them, that will create a nice strong bond and your pot won't fall apart. As we spread the slip around our scratched area, we can pinch the end of our coil and start to wrap our coil around the base of our pot. You can use a tool or your finger to smooth down the beginning. There's a couple of different ways to do this. If your coils are much shorter than mine, then you might just like to add one coil, one loop at a time, joining them. This one's a bit longer, so I'm going to continue to scratch and slip and keep wrapping it around until this particular coil is finished. Now, another thing to think about, as you are rolling your coils, sometimes they flatten out a bit, so don't be afraid to tap them back into a round shape before you keep rolling. Again, here you see me creating more slip because I have clay on my fingers. I tip it into the water and then mix it around to make it nice and slippery. Step 5, blending the inside of our coil pot. We're going to do this on the inside and not the outside, so you can still see our coils. So using an icy pole stick or a blending tool, you could also use your finger. We gently drag just a small amount of the inside of your coils down to the bottom. You can see what happens here is it blends the inside to make it nice and smooth. So we're just dragging a tiny amount, pushing the clay from the inside of the coil down and blending it over the gaps that our coils have made by wrapping them around. I'm going to continue this process until the whole inside of the bowl has been dragged down and those gaps are all covered up. Then we might use a tiny amount of water just on the end of our finger to blend and smooth it all to make it nice and neat on the inside. You might choose to do most of this while your clay pot is sitting on the board or on the table. It takes a little bit of a delicate hold to not squash your bowl if you're holding it up in the air. Also a good opportunity to have a look around the outside of your coils to make sure none of them have cracked. If the outside has cracked, just dip your finger back into the water and smooth them out gently. Now we repeat the last coil process until our bowl is the height that we're happy with. I had a bit of trouble rolling mine on my board. It kept moving around, so I did switch to my table. It just means a little bit more cleanup is involved. If your coil does happen to get out of shape or go flat, just tap it back into shape and keep rolling. Make sure to scratch and slip all of the surfaces as you're going. The next coil that I add will also need to be blended down into the one below it. So this time we don't blend all the way to the bottom of the bowl. We just blend this coil I'm adding now onto the next one to fill up those gaps. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Okay, a couple of things to keep an eye out for while you're adding your extra coils onto the top is if you want your pot to be the same size the whole way up, you need to make sure that the outside of your coils is lined up. So always check the sides of your bowl, check from the top as well, and that'll help you keep your pot nice and evenly shaped. If you're trying to make it get bigger or get smaller, then the placement of your coils will be a little bit different. Be very careful not to squash the sides of your bowl as you're blending these. It does take a very delicate touch with the hand if you are holding your bowl. If you're a little unsure with that part, leave it on the bench, like I said before, and that will help you keep your bowl a little more stable. Once you've blended the top coil down to the next one, don't forget to dip your finger in the water and smooth it all out as you go. As your pot gets taller, it'll be much harder to clean and smooth the inside of it. Okay, adding more coils again, just repeat the process. Roll, scratch, or score. Add water to create slip and then blend. This coil I wrap around and break off for it to be the right size to start and stop. Make sure that none of your coils start and stop on top of each other, and that'll create a stronger pot. This one here I blend across and smooth just to make one coil at a time. By doing this, you can get an even amount of rings coiling up your pot. So there are a few different ways of doing this, like I said at the beginning. It's your choice whether you do one continuous coil or you do a variety of them. I'm just slightly staggering my joins, not exactly in the same place each time, so that I don't notice where the joins are at the end. Going from one side to the other with this is also a great way to do it, but it's totally up to you. Again, to keep the pot the same the whole way down on the inside, we're blending each coil down to the next one, just dragging a small amount of clay. As my coil pot gets taller, I need to support it a little bit more with my empty hand. Here I've just gathered up a little bit of clay that I've taken too much out of while I'm blending, so I'm just adding that back into the pot. Clay is very forgiving. As you do this, if you do take too much clay out while you're blending, you can just take it off the end of your stick, or if it's stuck to your finger, and poke it back in any of the gaps that you have. Again, we're trying to keep our pot the same thickness and same shape the whole way around. And so I'm just supporting the outside of the pot with my left hand and blending with my right. Making sure to add that final stage of water to smooth out any gaps or any cracks. And when you're happy with the height of your pot, then you're finished. Good idea to add your name to the bottom of the pot. You can either write it on the inside with a skewer or something sharp, or you can write it on the bottom, being very, very careful with how deep you press. If you wanted to make holes in the bottom of your pot or add feet, you can add the holes now, but the feet may need to wait till it's hardened a little bit. So give it a little bit of time to dry and make sure it's still a bit soft, and then you can add extra balls of feet to the bottom at a later stage. I hope you had fun with my clay coil pot lesson. Thank you, my amazing art students.